The Philadelphia cemetery rested in complete silence under the late morning light. The grass appeared impossibly green against the sorrow, too vibrant for grief. White funeral drapes swayed gently in the breeze, billowing like the event planners believed elegance could soften death itself. Billionaire Claire Harrington lay motionless in the open casket, hands folded across her chest, makeup applied with precision, skin pale as untouched snow. A woman who commanded boardrooms and built empires should not look this fragile. Whispers rippled through the mourners, the same phrase repeated again and again. She looks like she's sleeping. Victor Harrington stood close enough to the casket to appear devoted, far enough to maintain composure. He nodded at Pastor Collins with calculated timing, guiding the rhythm of the ceremony like a conductor. Every second mattered. Every minute brought him closer to something he'd been racing toward since the moment Claire collapsed in their home 3 days ago. When Pastor Collins cleared his throat to begin the final prayer, Victor exhaled slowly, his shoulders dropping as if he'd just crossed an invisible finish line. Then the barking erupted. It wasn't playful. It wasn't distant. It was raw, urgent, violent with desperation, a sound ripped from something deeper than instinct. Every head whipped around in unison. A golden retriever tore through the crowd, paws digging into manicured grass, muscles rippling beneath his coat. People stumbled backward, gasping. A woman clutched her face with both hands. A man leaned forward, eyes wide with disbelief. Phones lifted instantly. Recording began. "Whose dog is that?" someone shouted, voice cracking. Bishop didn't slow. He charged straight toward the casket, straight toward Claire. A security guard stepped forward, hand extended, but Bishop snapped once, not to attack, but to warn. His eyes were wild, pupils dilated, his entire body trembling. Then he did something that made the entire crowd freeze. He stood on his hind legs and pressed his nose to Claire's lips, then to her neck, then to her chest. He whined, long and broken, the sound of something begging for an answer that wouldn't come. Victor's face hardened into stone. "Get that animal out of here!" The guard reached again. Bishop barked louder, pawing at the edge of the coffin, wood scraping beneath his claws. It sounded violent. It looked chaotic. But it wasn't anger driving him. It was terror. A woman in the second row whispered, "He's trying to wake her up." Victor's voice turned sharp. "He's disturbed. Remove him immediately." Dr. Edwin Lang stepped forward with a strained smile, hands clasped like he was performing a role he'd rehearsed. "This is simply grief manifesting. Animals react unpredictably to loss." But then Bishop stopped barking. He lowered his head, inhaled deeply near Claire's parted lips, and released one sharp, clean bark. Not frantic, not random, a single warning bark, precise and intentional, like a trained medical alert. The crowd went utterly still. Claire's longtime assistant, Naomi, pushed through the mourners, tears streaming down her face. "That's Bishop. He's Claire's dog." Victor's eyes flashed with something cold. Then he should have been kept away from this. Naomi swallowed hard, her voice shaking but steady. Claire trained him, not for tricks, for medical alerts. The words landed like ice shattering across glass. Eyes moved from Bishop to Claire, from Claire to Dr. Lang, from Dr. Lang back to Victor. Naomi's voice cracked. Claire had episodes last year, fainting spells, heart irregularities. Bishop could sense them before the monitors ever could. Victor's jaw tightened. "She is gone, Naomi." Bishop whined again, pressing his nose insistently against Claire's throat. Then someone in the back row said, "Her chest just moved." "No, it didn't," another voice countered. But the doubt was already spreading. Bishop barked again, then turned toward the crowd and barked directly at Naomi. commanding her attention. Then he spun back to Claire and pawed at her wrist, desperate and deliberate. Naomi took a step closer, trembling. Someone needs to check her. Right now. Victor moved in front of the casket, blocking access. Enough. This is becoming a circus. But the crowd was no longer under his control. The grief he'd carefully orchestrated was cracking, transforming into something far more dangerous. Suspicion. Aunt Marlene, Claire's sharp-eyed older aunt with a spine like tempered steel, stepped forward. Victor, if you're absolutely certain she's dead, then checking her changes nothing. Dr. Lang interjected quickly. Too quickly. I confirmed her passing. There is no pulse. Aunt Marlene's gaze narrowed. With what equipment? Out here in the grass? Dr. Lang hesitated. That single hesitation was all Bishop needed. He barked and barked until the sound felt like it was vibrating through the earth itself, through the casket, through every person standing frozen in that cemetery. Aunt Marlene leaned down and placed 2 fingers against Claire's neck, right where Bishop kept pressing his nose. She closed her eyes. 1 second. 2. Her eyes snapped open. I feel something. To understand how they reached this moment, how a billionaire ended up in a casket with a pulse, you need to go back 3 days, back to the empire Claire built, back to the man who stood beside her, and back to the dog who refused to forget what love looks like when it's real. A wave of shock moved through the mourners like electricity through water. It wasn't cheering. It wasn't relief. It was the cold, skin-prickling realization that something impossible might be true. That's impossible, Victor said, but his voice had changed. The smooth control was fracturing. Bishop didn't stop. He barked again, sharper this time, then pressed his entire body against the side of the casket like he was trying to anchor Claire to this world through sheer will. Aunt Marlene pulled her hand back slowly, staring at her fingers as if they'd just touched fire. There's a rhythm, faint, but it's there. The crowd erupted into chaos. Some people screamed, others prayed. Phones rose higher, zooming in, capturing everything. Move back, Victor shouted at Marlene, lunging toward the casket. But 3 men in black suits stepped between them, blocking his path. The wall of mourners was no longer on his side. Naomi's voice cut through the noise, trembling but clear. Bishop is trained. Claire rescued him 4 years ago, after he was abandoned with a broken leg. She nursed him back to health, and when her own health started failing, she had him trained as a medical alert dog. Victor spun toward her, eyes wild. This is insanity. The dog is confused. No, Naomi said, tears streaming down her face. He's not confused. He's doing exactly what Claire taught him to do. Bishop barked again, this time staring directly at Dr. Lang. The doctor stepped back instinctively, his face draining of color. Someone in the crowd whispered, "Why would a trained alert dog act like this if she's really gone?" Another voice joined in. "And why is the husband fighting so hard to stop us from checking?" Victor's hands clenched into fists. "She is my wife. I will not allow her dignity to be violated by hysteria." But the word dignity landed wrong. It sounded rehearsed, hollow. Aunt Marlene stood tall, her voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. "If you care about her dignity, Victor, then you'll want the truth, not a burial based on doubt." Dr. Lang tried to step forward, his professional mask slipping back into place. "Ladies and gentlemen, I understand emotions are high, but I performed a thorough examination. Claire Harrington passed from sudden cardiac arrest. What you're witnessing is a grief response from an animal who doesn't understand death." Bishop turned his head slowly toward Dr. Lang and released one sharp, clean bark. Not frantic, not desperate. Intentional. The kind of bark that said, "I know exactly what I'm doing." The cemetery fell into a silence so complete that the rustle of the white drapes sounded like thunder. People looked from Bishop to Claire, from Claire to Victor, from Victor to Dr. Lang, and in that silence, everyone began to understand the same terrifying truth. The dog knew something they didn't. Before we continue, I need to pause for just a moment. If this story is gripping you, if you're feeling what Bishop is feeling right now, that desperate need to uncover the truth, please hit that like button. And if you want to see how this unfolds, if you need to know whether Claire survives, subscribe and turn on notifications, because what happens next will leave you speechless. Now, back to the story. Bishop pressed his nose against Claire's throat again, then moved to her chest, inhaling deeply like he was searching for something invisible to human eyes. A woman near the back gasped. "Did you see that?" Her chest moved. "No, it didn't," a man beside her said. But his voice lacked conviction. "I saw it too," someone else whispered. Doubt spread through the crowd like wildfire catching dry grass. What had been shock was transforming into something more dangerous: suspicion. Aunt Marlene turned to Victor, her eyes narrowing. "Why the rush, Victor? Claire's colleagues are still flying in from Europe. Her board members haven't even arrived. Why insist on burying her today?" Victor's jaw tightened. For closure, for peace. This is what she would have wanted. "Is it?" Marlene's voice was ice. "Or is it what you want?" Dr. Lang stepped forward quickly, too quickly, his hands raised in a calming gesture. "The cause of death is confirmed. Cardiac arrest. There's no pulse, no respiration, no—" "How did you confirm it?" Marlene interrupted, her gaze locked on him like a predator. Dr. Lang blinked. "I'm sorry? You said there's no pulse. How did you check? With what equipment?" The doctor's mouth opened, closed, opened again. "Standard examination protocol. I checked manually." "When?" Marlene pressed. "Where? At the hospital?" "Of course, at the hospital. Then why wasn't a state examiner called? Why no autopsy for a woman this prominent who died suddenly at 42? Dr. Lang's face went pale. The family requested privacy. Victor didn't want an autopsy, Marlene finished, her voice rising. How convenient. The crowd shifted. Murmurs grew louder. Phones captured every word. Bishop barked again, louder now, pacing beside the casket. His eyes never left Claire's face, and the desperation in his movements made even the skeptics pause. Victor's composure finally cracked. "Enough! This is my wife's funeral, not an interrogation." "Then let us call an ambulance," Naomi said, her phone already in her hand. "If she's truly gone, medical professionals will confirm it. If she's not—" Victor moved fast, reaching for Naomi's phone. But a man in a black suit blocked him, then another, then another. The mourners had become a wall. "You're acting guilty, Victor," Aunt Marlene said quietly, but her voice carried through the entire cemetery. "Why?" Victor's breath came faster. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool morning air. "I am grieving, that is all." Marlene knelt beside the casket again, ignoring him completely. She placed her fingers on Claire's neck, this time pressing harder, searching more carefully. Bishop whined and pushed his nose against Claire's wrist, as if guiding Marlene's hand. The entire cemetery held its breath. Marlene's eyes closed. Her lips moved silently, counting. 10 seconds passed, 20. Then her eyes opened, and the shock in them was undeniable. "It's weak," she whispered, "but it's there. God help us, she has a pulse." The crowd exploded. Some people screamed. Others cried out to heaven. Camera zoomed in on Claire's face, searching for any sign of movement. Victor stumbled backward, his face draining of all color. No, that's impossible." Naomi raised her phone, dialing 911. Victor lunged toward her, but the wall of mourners closed tighter. Someone grabbed his arm. Someone else blocked his path. "Let them check," Aunt Marlene said, her voice trembling but absolute. "Let the truth come out." And then, barely audible beneath the chaos, Aunt Marlene leaned close to the casket and whispered the words that shattered everything. "She's not gone." Naomi's hands shook as she held the phone to her ear, speaking rapidly to the 911 dispatcher. "Yes, a pulse. She's in a casket at Oakmont Cemetery. Please hurry." In that moment, something clicked in Naomi's memory. A conversation from 6 months ago, late at night, in Claire's office. Claire had looked exhausted, almost afraid, and she'd said something strange. "If anything ever happens to me, Naomi, don't trust the first story you hear." At the time, Naomi had dismissed it as stress. Now, those words felt like prophecy. She turned toward Victor, really seeing him for the first time. "What did you do?" Victor's face was a mask of panic barely held together. "Nothing. I did nothing." But the crowd no longer believed him. The mourners pressed closer, phones recording from every angle, trapping him in a circle of witnesses. Dr. Lang started backing away, step by step, as if the ground beneath him was cracking open. Then Bishop did something that changed everything. He stopped barking, his body went rigid, and he stared directly at Victor's coat pocket. Not at Victor's face, at his pocket. A low growl rumbled in the dog's throat, the kind of warning a predator gives before it strikes. Victor noticed. His hand moved instinctively to his coat, pressing against something inside. Aunt Marlene saw it. "What's in your pocket, Victor?" "Nothing." But his voice cracked. "Show us. This is absurd." Security stepped forward. Not the guards Victor had hired, but 2 off-duty police officers who'd attended as mourners. One of them placed a firm hand on Victor's shoulder. "Sir, if you're not hiding anything, this will be quick." Victor jerked away, and in that sudden movement, something fell from his coat. It hit the grass with a dull, metallic clink. A syringe, half filled with a clear, viscous liquid. The crowd recoiled as if a bomb had dropped. Screams erupted. Phones zoomed in, capturing the evidence lying in the grass like a confession written in glass and steel. "Oh my God," someone cried. "He was going to call the police." Dr. Lang broke. His professional composure shattered completely. He stumbled backward, shaking his head violently. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know he still had." Victor lunged for the syringe, but the officers grabbed both his arms, forcing him to his knees. And then, cutting through the chaos like lightning through storm clouds, a sound emerged that made the entire world stop. A cough, weak, thin, but undeniably real. Every head turned toward the casket. Claire's chest rose, fell, rose again. Bishop whined, pressing his head against the side of the coffin, his entire body trembling with relief. Another cough, stronger this time. Claire's eyelids fluttered, her lips parted. Pastor Collins dropped his Bible. Aunt Marlene gasped, both hands covering her mouth. Naomi collapsed to her knees, sobbing. Claire's eyes opened slowly, unfocused, struggling to make sense of light and faces and the impossible fact that she was still breathing. Her gaze drifted across the crowd, then stopped, on Victor, kneeling in the grass, handcuffed, exposed. Her lips moved. The sound that emerged was barely a whisper, rough and broken, but it carried through the silent cemetery like a verdict delivered from beyond the grave. Victor. That single word destroyed him. His face collapsed, his body sagged, and as police sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer with every second, the man who'd tried to bury his wife alive realized that the truth he'd tried to silence had just spoken his name. Chaos exploded across the cemetery like a dam breaking. Prayers erupted from every direction. Screams of shock mixed with cries of relief. People collapsed to their knees, hands raised to the sky. Others stood frozen, phones trembling in their hands as they recorded the impossible. Claire's chest continued to rise and fall, each breath fragile but real. Her eyes blinked slowly, trying to focus on the faces surrounding her. "She's alive!" someone screamed. "Oh God, she's alive!" Victor thrashed against the officers holding him, his voice raw and desperate. "No, this isn't happening. She was gone. She was supposed to—" But his words dissolved into incoherent shouting as reality crushed him. Dr. Lang stumbled backward, both hands raised as if trying to ward off the truth. His face was ghostly white, sweat pouring down his temples. "I didn't want this," he stammered. "He threatened me." Victor said if I didn't sign the papers, he'd destroy my career, my family, everything. "Liar!" Victor screamed, but the word rang hollow. The police sirens grew louder, red and blue lights flashing through the trees as 3 squad cars tore into the cemetery. Aunt Marlene leaned over the casket, her voice breaking. "Claire, sweetheart, stay with us. Help is coming." Claire's lips moved again, forming words that barely had sound. Her eyes, still unfocused and heavy, drifted across the crowd until they locked onto Dr. Lang. Recognition flickered there, then betrayal. "You," her voice was like gravel scraping glass. "You signed." Dr. Lang's knees buckled. He caught himself against a gravestone, sobbing, "I'm sorry. God forgive me. I'm sorry." Bishop remained pressed against the casket, his body a living barrier between Claire and anyone who might try to harm her again. His eyes tracked every movement, every person who stepped too close. 4 police officers rushed through the crowd, parting mourners like a blade through water. "What's the situation?" the lead officer demanded. Aunt Marlene pointed at Victor. "That man tried to bury his wife alive. The syringe on the ground, check it. And arrest the doctor. He signed a false death certificate." The officers moved fast. 2 grabbed Victor, yanking him to his feet despite his struggles. Another picked up the syringe with gloved hands, sealing it in an evidence bag. "This is insane!" Victor shouted. "She was dead! Everyone saw!" But his voice was drowned out by the wave of witnesses all speaking at once. Phones thrust toward the officers, showing footage of everything: the dog's warning, the pulse check, the syringe falling, Claire's resurrection. Pastor Collins stood motionless, his Bible in the grass at his feet, staring at Claire as if witnessing a miracle he couldn't comprehend. An ambulance screamed into the cemetery, paramedics jumping out with equipment. "Female, early 40s, possible drug-induced cardiac suppression," one paramedic called out, immediately checking Claire's vitals. "Pulse is weak, but steady. Pupils responsive. Get her on oxygen now." As they carefully lifted Claire from the casket onto a stretcher, she turned her head slightly. Her eyes found Bishop. The dog whined, his tail wagging weakly, relief flooding through his entire body. "Good boy," Claire whispered, so quiet only those closest could hear. "Good boy, Bishop." The paramedics loaded her into the ambulance. Bishop tried to follow, but Naomi gently held him back. "They'll take care of her. You saved her. You saved her life." Victor and Dr. Lang were pushed into separate police cars, both handcuffed, both facing cameras that would broadcast their arrest around the world within minutes. As the ambulance pulled away, sirens wailing, the mourners stood in stunned silence. They'd come to a funeral. They'd witnessed a resurrection. And the entire world was watching. The story detonated across every news channel within hours. Billionaire CEO rises from the dead husband arrested for attempted murder. The footage went viral instantly. Millions watched the golden retriever barking at the casket. Millions saw the syringe fall. Millions heard Claire whisper her husband's name from inside her own coffin. Within 48 hours, toxicology reports confirmed what everyone suspected. Claire had been injected with a powerful paralytic agent, a drug designed to slow the heart and suppress breathing to levels undetectable without specialized equipment. She hadn't died. She'd been made to appear dead. 3 weeks later, the trial began. The courthouse was surrounded by satellite trucks and protesters holding signs, "Justice for Claire" and "Bishop the Hero." Security had to create barriers to manage the crowds trying to get inside. The courtroom itself was packed beyond capacity. Journalists filled the back rows. Cameras positioned in every corner captured everything for the live broadcast that would reach millions. Claire sat in the front row, flanked by Aunt Marlene and Naomi. She looked thinner, paler, but her eyes were sharp and focused. Bishop sat at her feet, wearing a service vest, his presence approved by the judge as emotional support. Victor and Dr. Lang sat at separate defense tables, both in prison jumpsuits, both avoiding eye contact with everyone. The prosecutor stood, his voice carrying through the silent courtroom. "Your Honor, this case represents a conspiracy so calculated, so cruel, that it defies comprehension. The defendant, Victor Harrington, sought to murder his wife, not with violence, but with deception, to bury her alive while the world believed she had died naturally." Gasps echoed through the gallery. Over the next week, witnesses testified, one by one. Naomi took the stand, her voice steady despite tears. "Claire told me 6 months ago, if anything happens to me, don't trust the first story. I didn't understand then. I understand now." Aunt Marlene testified about the rushed burial, Victor's insistence, the strange urgency that felt wrong from the beginning. A toxicologist explained how the drug worked. In the right dose, it mimics death almost perfectly. Only advanced monitoring could detect the difference. If she'd been buried, she would have suffocated within hours. The courtroom fell into horrified silence. When Dr. Lang was called to testify, he could barely stand. His voice shook as he confessed everything. "Victor threatened my family, my hospital, everything I'd built. He said if I didn't sign the death certificate and declare cardiac arrest, he'd ruin me. I was a coward. I signed." "And what was Victor's motive?" the prosecutor asked. Dr. Lang's voice broke. "Control. If Claire died, Victor would inherit her empire. Billions of dollars. Complete control of Harrington Health Systems." The courtroom erupted. The judge hammered for order. When Victor finally took the stand, his mask was gone. "I built that company with her," he snarled. "I deserved half. She treated me like an accessory. So yes, I wanted what was mine." "She was your wife," the prosecutor said quietly. "She was an obstacle." The entire courtroom recoiled. The judge's voice was ice when she delivered the verdict. "Victor Harrington, you are guilty of attempted murder, conspiracy, and fraud. I sentence you to life in prison without possibility of parole." Victor screamed as he was dragged away. Dr. Lang received 25 years. As they were led out of the courtroom, Claire sat perfectly still, Bishop's head resting on her lap. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She simply exhaled, as if releasing something she'd been holding since the moment she woke up in that casket. Justice had been served. But healing that would take longer. Recovery didn't happen overnight. For weeks after the trial, Claire barely left her estate. The physical effects of the drug took time to fade: tremors in her hands, fatigue that pulled her under without warning, nightmares of waking up in darkness, unable to move or scream. But the emotional wounds cut deeper. She'd trusted Victor completely. She'd built a life with him, shared her empire, her home, her vulnerabilities, and he'd repaid that trust by trying to erase her. Bishop never left her side. He slept at the foot of her bed, followed her from room to room, rested his head on her lap during the quiet hours when grief overwhelmed her. When the nightmares came, his presence pulled her back to reality. "You knew," she whispered to him one night, running her fingers through his golden fur. "You knew when no one else did." Bishop's tail wagged slowly, his dark eyes watching her with the kind of loyalty that asked for nothing in return. Naomi became more than an assistant. She moved into the estate's guest house, not as staff, but as family. They had coffee every morning, talked through the hard days, laughed cautiously through the good ones. "You don't owe me anything," Claire told her one afternoon. Naomi shook her head. "You gave me a career when I had nothing. I'm staying because I want to, because you're not just my boss, you're my sister." Claire restructured Harrington Health Systems from the ground up. She implemented new safeguards. No single person could control the company. Board members were diversified. Whistleblower protections were strengthened. She funded domestic abuse resources and created a foundation to help people escape dangerous relationships. "What happened to me won't happen to someone else," she told reporters during a press conference. "Not if I can prevent it." Bishop sat beside her during the interview, calm and regal, wearing a custom collar engraved with the words, "The One Who Knew." The world fell in love with him. Offers poured in: movie deals, book contracts, endorsement requests. Claire declined them all. "He's not a spectacle," she said firmly. "He's my family." But she did honor him privately. A portrait of Bishop was commissioned and hung in the main lobby of Harrington Health Systems headquarters. Beneath it, a plaque read, "Sometimes the smallest voice speaks the loudest truth." 6 months after the trial, Claire stood in her office overlooking Philadelphia. The city stretched out before her, alive and indifferent, the same skyline she'd seen the day Victor had poisoned her. But she wasn't the same woman anymore. She'd survived something designed to erase her. She'd come back not with rage, but with purpose. "Miss Harrington?" Naomi appeared in the doorway. "The new board meeting is ready." Claire turned, Bishop rising to follow her. "Let's go." As she walked down the hallway, employees stopped to greet her, not out of obligation, but genuine warmth. She'd always been respected. Now, she was beloved, because survival had given her something she'd never fully understood before: a second life. And this time, she would live it on her own terms. If this story has moved you, if you've felt Claire's pain and celebrated her survival, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Sometimes we all need a reminder that even after betrayal, even after darkness, we can rise again. Now, let's finish this journey together. 1 year later, Claire stood at the entrance of Oakmont Cemetery. It was early morning, the same time of day they'd tried to bury her. The grass was still damp with dew, the white drapes long gone, replaced by rows of headstones standing silent in the light. Bishop walked beside her, older now, his golden coat touched with gray around the muzzle. His steps were slower, but his eyes remained alert, watching her the way he always had. They walked together to the spot where her casket had rested. Someone had planted flowers there, wildflowers, bright and defiant against the somber landscape. A small memorial stone read, "Where death was defeated by love." Claire knelt, her fingers brushing the smooth surface. Bishop sat beside her, leaning his weight gently against her shoulder. "I come here sometimes," she said softly, though no one else was around. "Not because I'm afraid anymore, but because this is where everything changed." The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the scent of earth and blossoms. I was so focused on building an empire that I forgot to protect myself. I trusted the wrong person with everything, and I almost paid for it with my life. Bishop's tail wagged slowly, a steady rhythm of comfort. Claire looked down at him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. But you're the one who saved me. Not money, not power, not all the things I thought mattered. You. She wrapped her arms around Bishop, burying her face in his fur. The world overlooks what it doesn't understand. They see a dog. I see the soul, who refused to let me go. When she pulled back, she was smiling. I've learned something this year, she said, standing slowly. Truth doesn't always come from the places we expect. Sometimes it comes from the smallest, quietest corners, from the ones we rescue, from the loyalty that asks for nothing but gives everything. Bishop stood beside her, his gaze steady and calm, as if he'd always known what she was just now understanding. Love doesn't need a heartbeat to be human, Claire whispered. Sometimes it just needs to be real. They walked together back through the cemetery, past rows of stones marking lives ended and remembered. But Claire wasn't mourning anymore. She was grateful. Grateful for second chances. Grateful for the voices that speak when everyone else is silent. Grateful for Bishop, who saw her not as a billionaire or a victim, but simply as someone worth saving. As they reached the gates, Claire paused and looked back one last time at the place where she'd almost been buried. Then she turned forward, toward the light spilling across the city she'd helped build, and kept walking. Because some stories don't end with death. Some end with resurrection, and the ones who save us aren't always the ones we expect. So here's my question for you. Who's the bishop in your life? Who saw the truth when everyone else looked away? Who refused to give up on you when the world had already moved on? Drop their name in the comments. Tell their story, because loyalty like that deserves to be honored. And if this story touched you, if it reminded you that hope exists even in the darkest moments, please share it. Someone out there needs to hear it today. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And remember, sometimes the smallest voice speaks the loudest truth. See you in the next story.